It's not every day that you get to sit down with somebody who has a background as an engineer and is also a six-figure freelance writer. So I'm so excited to interview Adam Kimmel. He has a very successful freelance writing business, and he's sharing tips about how he operates his business and how to get clients. I think my introverted writers out there who are transitioning from an unrelated career and want to pursue freelance writing are going to find a ton of value in this interview. So make sure if you're watching this on YouTube that you subscribe. I drop videos every week giving freelance business advice. If you're listening to this on the podcast, definitely write me a review. It's a free way to keep me going and encourage me and support me. And let's get right into this interview with Adam Kimmel. Welcome, Adam. You are man number 3 on this podcast. I got a lot of feedback that I don't have men on my podcast. Tell me about your background, what type of writing you do, and how you got into this world.
Yeah, it's probably the last place I thought I'd end up when I started my career. So I got an engineering degree in chemical engineering. My kind of passion's always been the environment. So I thought chemical engineering would let me pursue that in an active way. And then I took a sales role to start, and that didn't really work. And so then I went back and got a master's degree in mechanical engineering and spent the beginning of my career in research and development, working on fuel cell products, green energy, electric vehicle components, things that, I thought would really promote the environment. The problem became when I invented something, I would have to explain what I had done to the patent attorney. And the patent attorney are usually pretty specialized. They know the industry well. So it was an easy way to get into explaining something to someone who wasn't actively involved in the work. So I'd have to write down explanations of these complicated, heat exchangers and system designs that I would make, and then make sure the patent attorney could play it back. And then I would review that document. If the patent attorney liked it and they wanted to proceed, we would have to have the business, invest in the patent. So then I would have to explain it to somebody who was less familiar with the industry and somebody more in procurement or in charge of marketing and the finances. And so that was when I really had to sharpen my muscle of, this person doesn't have the background. How are they going to understand the the importance of this thing? They don't need to know the technical details necessarily, but why this is impactful and how it helps. And so that was sort of, I realized that was a big need, and one that most engineers didn't do well. So then I just continued to think, all right, well, if that worked for this product, could it work for another one? And could it work for this group within the company? And could it work for another company? And so then it just kind of expanded from there. So that was around 2013.
Okay, yeah. So what's interesting about your background is that you think of these things like sales, engineering, writing, and they're really like very different skills that typically are not associated with one another. How do you think that all came about for you?
Well, I think they didn't used to be. I think products didn't always start as complex as they are now. I think you had more discrete, if it's manufacturing, it's only manufacturing. If it's electronics, it's only electronics. But now, especially with, IoT and AI and these types of things that you hear about a lot, the complexity of products is really starting to increase in a big way. And that's due to these different functions coming together. And I think there's a parallel there with marketing, engineering, and sales. I mean, my first job was a sales job and I was lousy at it. I mean, I'm an introvert. I think and write. That's my superpower set. So going out and saying, hey, do you want to buy this? You don't know me, but that just didn't make sense. But I wasn't doing it the right way. It was a technical product. And had I known then what I know now, I might say, all right, well, here's the features of what we have, but here's why it will help you, and why here's a problem I know you have based on however I figured that out. So I looked at where they might go for information, and here's what we developed to solve it. Here's how it solves it. And here's why it'll make the end state for you better. And so I think that when you bring in and enroll marketing and sales in with the technology, they become champions and advocates for each other, these disciplines. So it helps sales inform the customers. They're more secure and confident in the way that they're able to talk about an invention. And engineering starts to learn that if nobody understands it, no one will ever buy it. I mean, that's, rule number one of selling anything. So I think each can learn from the other. And, the marketing just kind of ties all of that together to say, here are the ways that you should interrelate each side, how to bring the customer in, and then how to promote the benefits.
And right now, you write for engineers. Is that correct? I was looking at your website and trying to understand, your specialty. Would you say you write for engineers?
Yeah, it's a little bit unique in that my audience is usually engineers. So working level engineers, usually at the principal or above level, or senior or above level, but then engineering managers. So those that are kind of starting to lean over into the business side. But there's an intermediary of the marketer that usually has to screen or go through these pieces. So writing for their customer has been the biggest, I think, shift in that that's who the pieces are written for, but the marketer needs to understand why the engineer will like it when they see it. Trust me doesn't usually work. So enrolling the marketers along the way, and once we start a relationship, they realize to just get out of the way once we get into the technical details. But yeah, the audience is technical usually in nature, sometimes for business leaders if it's a higher level trend, but often business leaders take their opinion from the technical team. They'll want the technical team to recommend, hey, do you think this is a good idea? So those are the ones that need to be convinced first before the business will come alongside.
Okay. Explain to me how you got into writing. What was the trajectory?
Well, the first things I would write were presentations, so PowerPoints. So I would take, okay, I patented this heat exchanger. How do I explain what I've done to internal stakeholders, technical team members, peers? So you'd make a PowerPoint. I mean, this is, a pretty typical thing. And I took PowerPoints a little bit differently than we had done it before. I mean, I looked at that PowerPoint as a story. PowerPoint inherently to me is boring. I mean, anytime you sit there and read slides at a presentation, the more words that are on the slide, the less of the presenter you get, the more people tune out, usually within the first 30 seconds or something like that. So you had to make the slides engaging. And so the best way to do that is to one, personalize it, and two, make it into a story. So the story usually starts with the problem you're trying to solve. Why are we here and what are we talking about? So you frame the problem, create the characters, develop them throughout. Here are the protagonists and the antagonists, to kind of use that analogy. And then how is the hero, which is the subject or the product, how does that come in to solve the problem? How does it defeat these antagonistic movements and get to a point where the solution moves forward for everybody involved, so that at the end the audience takes away that there is no other conclusion than the one we've just heard. This is the right answer, we're in, versus here's a graph of this data, here's a point on the graph. I mean, just explaining charts of data isn't enough. It's what story is the graph telling us? I mean, engineers respond very well to these graphs. So I mean, I think they're visual, they're usually colorful, so less words, more graphs. But then again, what is it telling and why is it showing that? And then is there any of that wasn't expected? I mean, some of the trends are something that they would expect, but if there was something they wouldn't expect, they're very interested in that. And so that, starting with the presentation and then moving to text, white papers and things, that's the way that we framed it. I said, all right, here's why it was novel, and here's what you wouldn't expect, and here's the conclusion that you can draw from that. This is how learning happens, right? Engineers, if they walk away from a piece that knowing something that they didn't learn before, or at least seeing a trend they didn't expect, they're interested and they'll dig deeper and they'll search for more information. And so I think converting that story and that support using data in a way that touches them in their day-to-day, like they could see how this would apply to their life, that personalizes it for them. So they're interested, it's personalized, and they understand the story.
Okay, got it. And okay, so you started off, you're saying in your writing career as writing PowerPoints essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then, and was this freelance? Was this for a company? Like, give writers an idea of just like the big picture. Like, what were
Oh,
you
sure.
for, and how did you get into writing?
Sure. So my philosophy was, I mean, I always kind of love the idea of owning my time. I mean, freelancing is something I think that, it's a lot more popular now than it used to be. But even in those days, it was something that people were starting to get really, really concerned less about salary and more about their time. Time is flexibility. Has become kind of currency, I think. And so for me, I thought, what do people really like about what I'm doing? Is it necessarily the PowerPoint, or is it this message and this almost feeling that they take away? And so I thought it's writing that does that. So I heard feedback throughout my career that, oh, that's well written, or, oh, I like how you said that, or I like, so you hear this from different places and think, all right, well, there's something there. There's something that I'm doing that is resonating with people. And it's come at me from a different enough angles. Like, it isn't just my mom telling me this. This is people that are objective. So how can I take what I know and apply what I'm not really doing as much of? And so the thought was, all right, well, could I write a white paper for the company I work for? And so then I wrote a white paper, and I kind of took the principles of PowerPoint and applied that to a white paper with graphs and data support. And I thought, well, that's for somebody that already kind of knows what they're looking for. What if somebody didn't know this? What if they were walking in and just exposed to this? How would I write an article that introduced this? So I went to our marketing department and said, hey, can I write just a blog post on this and just introduce someone? And they loved it. I mean, they're always looking for ideas, usually a lot of blog posters. And so I started just proposing some things. And so that led me into the strategy piece, where just because I have an idea of something that would be interesting doesn't mean it fits within an overall strategy of how we wanted to teach people that. And so that's kind of where I learned the importance of strategy and how much more effective content writing becomes within the scope of a strategy. So then once I started to write for our internal company blog, there was a short step to say, all right, well, I know other companies have these blogs. I know there are other products and stories to tell. So then I just approached marketing agencies that marketed the same type of people I did, reached out. I saw a few that had postings for freelance writers. And I said, well, here's my background. I mean, at the time, 10 years of engineering, 2 engineering degrees. Could you use my writing here? And they were, excited, obviously, because most engineers can't do that. So I kind of carved out my space in the world that I didn't really see a lot of people existing, and then tried to leverage that. And so I gained experience. I learned some different industries through that agency who touched electronics and, technology and industrial manufacturing. I mean, I was in R&D in chemical engineering. So, I mean, that's a pretty far step, but working with those agencies allowed me to broaden. So, I mean, you hear a lot about people niching down. I had to niche up in a way. I mean, I was real narrow, and I had to say, oh, how could I make a go of this? So I need to bolt on some other industries. And so partnering with some of these marketing firms that looked for freelance help was the way I did that.
Okay, that makes sense. And in terms of making like the 6-figure income, how do you structure your business? Are you doing all the writing? Are you outsourcing? Are you an agency? What's the makeup of your business?
It's probably more like the solopreneur model, with the caveat of I have excellent support. So the way that I thought about it is I reached capacity very quickly doing everything myself. So including like my own accounting and invoicing and, just things that are non-value add for me to do. I mean, could you learn them? Sure. But that's any time spent doing those things is time not spent active revenue generation. So I hired a coach, and I worked with her for 6 months to just kind of frame, all right, this is my idea of what I want to be. Help me untangle this in my own head. And I think that the coaching was something I went into. I'll admit I was a little skeptical. It's a heavy investment. You have to find the right person. And there is an element of therapy, because it becomes, well, who are you and what do you want to be? And, really introspective questions. But it forced me to ask them and to say, all right, well, this business matters to me. There's an emotional attachment here because this is what I want it to do for the world, kind of as a mission statement. And I want to explain things that most people don't understand to help expand the value of them so that it isn't just a very narrow slice. And so, my coach helped me do that. And one of the outputs of that is that I needed a virtual assistant to start, and then a virtual business manager. So to handle some of these invoicing and back office tasks. And one of the ones that I didn't consider was the technology. I mean, with any new industry, I mean, there was all these platforms. I mean, how will I market myself? I mean, this is somebody that has grown into a thought partner for me, and a friend and a colleague and a coworker that has started to really help. I can bounce ideas off of her, and then she handles some of these other parts of the business that really don't make sense for me to do. I mean, I have a researcher that helps me. She's phenomenal as well. I've tried to outsource writing in various forms. What I found is I'm a writer. That doesn't really make sense. So to take the outsourcing step, I think you have to really, really reconcile in your own mind, what is it that you're only best suited to do, and what could you offload? I think the accounting stuff is an easy one, but even the core research, what I found is interviews. I can interview all right, there are others that could do it better than me. And so my colleague that helps me with researching also does interviews, and she's fantastic. So she pulls things out of interviews that maybe I wouldn't due to distraction or other time. So having somebody to help with the back office, things and the technology and other systems, and then helping with, some of the support functions for the articles that I write has really been what's moved the business forward for me. And when I did that, I was able to churn out more articles in the same amount of time. And the more of those I got, I was able to market those and share those as kind of case studies once I got performance data on them to say, hey, here's an article I wrote for a peer company of yours, and here was the performance. Then all of a sudden that's okay, there's a number to that. There's a metric that a prospective client could see. And then the third, I guess, would be online presence. So social media is not something that comes naturally to me, but LinkedIn has really been where I've made my hay. My coach told me you can't really be a secret and a success. So as much as I hate to hear that, need to be visible, LinkedIn is the place that my clients live. Engineers, they're not going to be on TikTok. They're not going to be on Facebook very much, but LinkedIn they trust, and information they hear there, they're going to like. So that would be kind of the third pillar after, supporting, the core function, and then back office would be, social media and or marketing. How do you make yourself more visible?
Yeah. Do you offer, so tell me what you offer. Is it just writing? Is it content strategy? Tell me about the services you offer, because I think that ties really well into why you have the infrastructure you do with your support staff.
Sure. I mean, I started with writing, obviously, right? You start with the thing you do the best and know the most. And then, as you grow it into a business, how could you expand that? How could you take that strength and leverage it elsewhere? Well, being a researcher, I know how to find trends, and one of the strengths I trumpet is vision. I can see things usually before others can see them. So strategy is a natural, service offering that kind of flows out of that. So for companies that come to me and ask for one blog post, it's like, well, okay, first of all, you need to understand one blog post isn't going to do anything for you. You can't measure that. It needs to be part of at least a mini campaign of some kind. But in absence of that, what does your strategy look like? And if they look at you like you're speaking a different language, they don't have one and just haven't thought that far. I can help them with that. So that's kind of the second, in addition to the writing, the content strategy, not full market strategy, but just what pieces of content do we need? And what that involves is competitive analysis. I can look at a competitive site and say, all right, as their target audiences, and then putting the engineer hat on, I can see what they're trying to get me to do, and here's how I'm reacting to it. That insight is pretty important for a marketing group trying to reach people that think like I do. So that insight is another way to kind of help the strategy piece. And other writers have started reaching out to me and say, all right, well, how do I get started with this? I'm an engineer and I want more flexibility, or I'm worried about layoffs, or I'm worried about, just more freedom in my life, more income for my family. How do I start that? And so I've started consulting and coaching. So I coach, younger writers or marketers that want to market to engineers, so I can come at it from both sides. If there's an engineer that needs to learn marketing, that's what I did. And if there's a marketer that wants to learn how engineers think, well, that's how I think. So that's another natural way to do that. And then the other one is just consulting for, companies. If they want, just more classical engineering work, if they want to know a trend that they see and how it impacts their business, I can help them with that. And I can also help them frame a position piece that they can take internally to say, here's what we think about this. And, we brought in a external partner to kind of help us frame our position here, but here's our analysis.
Got it. So seeing as how you mentor other writers and people who are aspiring to do this for a living, what would you say are the biggest mistakes that you see writers most commonly making, most often making?
When any writer, or when anyone starts a new venture, I mean, especially I've seen this with writers, the writing community is amazing. It's by far my favorite community. I just love how collaborative and just generally helpful writers can be. If you think about it, in a way, we're all competing with each other, at least in different niches. So in the business world, that, I don't know, it's just unnatural to collaborate with your competitors. I mean, I know that it happens, but writers don't seem to do that. They seem to understand that there's enough words to be written, and let's just help each other because of how great this discipline is. And they're very passionate about it. And so that passion sometimes leads them to make decisions that that kind of forget that they're trying to grow a business. And by that, I mean, taking on work that they really aren't passionate about or don't know as much about in order to make this, to get the plane off the ground, so to speak. And so I definitely took, work and projects earlier in my career that I probably shouldn't have. I just didn't know about it and really didn't interest me. Can I learn it? Sure. But did I really want to? And did it fit with who I am in this community? And the answer was a resounding no. And the result was like a B or a B plus article. When writing about what you're best suited to is where you get into the AA plus range. And I think intellectually we know that, but that's hard when you decide, oh, I want to make a business. Well, I need revenue to do that. And you start searching for it wherever you can. And the other thing is undercharging. I mean, if you're a junior, person coming up, I mean, yeah, you're not going to be able to command $1 a word, $1.50 a word, $2 a word rates off the bat. But if you do come in with specific expertise and you've spent half a career in an area, don't undersell that. I mean, there's no reason to say that, look, I have this expertise that is important to you and there's a value to that. And by the way, I can write it for you so that, people understand it. I think the tendency was just to kind of be accommodating and agreeable, that I see a lot of other younger writers doing this. And it's, draw some boundaries. And then the third one would have been scope creep. A lot of times, if somebody is helpful and kind of a good relationship, there might be a tendency if a new team member comes on board to say, oh, could we just find some images, or could you do some SEO keyword research? It's like, well, no, wait a minute. Now, what was agreed? And so if writers aren't clear about what the transaction is, and writers don't think of it as a transaction, this is a problem, but it is. There's a scope of work and there's a compensation tied to that. So if that isn't defined, I mean, contracts are something I usually use a lot, but in lieu of that, at least documenting in an email what is covered by the fee, then it makes scope creep seem almost awkward, where the person will ask for it and go, well, I mean, we've agreed to this scope, and so that's outside of it. Now here's my per word rate for that, or here's my per hour rate that I would need to add that task, but that's really out of scope. So then there's a conversation to be had.
Yeah, I like that you said that when you come from a prior career field, that's really the leverage you use to command a higher rate off the bat, because one of the biggest things I always preach is that you should take what you've done professionally and have real life experience in and choose that as your niche, because you'll really understand that target audience and be able to offer your expertise to whoever's hiring you. But a lot of people who are career changers will say to me, I want to leave my past career behind and I don't want to write about this topic and I hate this topic. Which I do understand, because I was in sales, I was in tech sales, and I became a copywriter in tech. And even though I was very burnt out from being in sales and I wanted desperately to get out of sales, I still found myself enjoying the writing aspect of it because it was something I knew. So what would you say to people who are like, well, I was an engineer, I was blah, 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 and I want to become a writer, but I have this passion for healing crystals and I want to become a astrology writer. What would you say to somebody who has that approach?
Sure. One, it's absolutely possible. What you start your career doing doesn't have to be what you end it doing. And that's another one where I think people know that intellectually, but it's a hard thing to do. So, I mean, what I would probably suggest is you may hate it, but you have some expertise in it, so you can charge for it. So that's one where you say, all right, well, I'm going to at least allocate some of my time to, putting gas in the car. I don't know why I'm saying so many analogies, but you need that fuel, which is the revenue, to pivot to a different one. But then you have to make sure that you're carving out some percentage of your time to write about what your heart seeks. What topics do you like? Do you have a right to win in those topics as much? Not as much. So maybe the rate wouldn't reflect that lack of expertise. So what you need to do there is to just build a portfolio of pieces in that space. And every project you get, then the rate creeps back up to where you're normalized with your other area of expertise. And then you can choose. Maybe writing about sales didn't make me hate it as much as working in it, or, something like that. Or maybe it didn't. I just want nothing to do with it. Then you just pivot away from it. And it becomes natural to just lop these branches off of the tree based on interest. I mean, I've had writers tell me, I love this earlier in my career. I'm burnt out. I want to pivot. So you can pivot as many times and as late in careers as you want. But if you don't have a right to win, meaning through expertise or samples or something, then it gets a little bit harder to command the rate that you're going to need to command for it to be a legitimate revenue stream.
Yeah, that's what I have seen. I totally agree. Jennifer Goforth Gregory, she said, and when I interviewed her, like, find work that feeds your soul, but you also need to do the work that will pay your mortgage. And I really loved that advice, because it's like, at the end of the day, certain topics are going to be the ones that pay the bill, or you pay the bills way easier than 50 fun articles, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. And Jennifer's somebody that when I was first starting, I found her and she was just getting her community going. I mean, I tout her as a mentor. She may not even know it, but I mean, I bought her book and just her whole philosophy, her blog. I just love the perspective. And that showed me that writers really were a supportive group. And there are emotional highs and lows when you do this. And to have a community of people that you can go to just get lifted. You can just go there and just lay a mess in front of the group and they'll help pick you up. And that just having that, I mean, doing, it's a little bit of a solitary field. So having that community somewhere, either virtually or in real life around you is another important thing, just to keep your spirit and your drive and motivation there. And she'll always say stuff like that more eloquently than I'll say it. But I agree. I mean, there's things that, but then also as you try to do things to keep the lights on, you may learn about other industries. I mean, I didn't really know a lot about electronics before 2018, 2019. I've become somewhat of a brand name electronics writer. There's no reason for this. Nothing in my background says I should, but electronics, as I mentioned earlier, kind of touch other technologies that I do know about. And so logically, you can kind of grow into that industry. And the more you write about it, the more you learn about it if you're researching appropriately. So that's kind of the way it naturally happens, but you have to start with your core strengths.
Absolutely. The coach you said you started working with, I'm very interested in that. How do you choose a coach? Did you choose someone who was specifically like, hey, I'm a freelance writing coach, or was it like a general online business coach?
It was a general online business coach, and I did something that I don't normally do. So as an engineer, I normally look at data and statistics and how do I get, the most analytically flawless approach to this. I just went with my gut. I found a few people that I thought were, I almost wanted to not find one specific to writing because I wanted to get those other perspectives. I kind of got coaching from my freelance group through Jennifer's group and others. So I felt like I kind of had that. I knew those tricks and tips at the time. So I wanted business advice and someone to kind of say, all right, well, I'm kind of different. There aren't people with this much engineering background that are trying to be freelance writers. So this unique problem is going to require a unique solution. So that was what I thought. And so I just kind of picked one, and through a couple conversations, I think the personality mesh is 100% critical. As I mentioned, it became a little bit like therapy as she starts to, dig into what I want this to be. I mean, questions that I should have been asking myself, but maybe was too afraid or didn't know to. That personality fit was key. So I think picking one that, that you feel comfortable with, but also that you feel like has the expertise was what did it. And, there is an element of luck. You take a leap and agreeing to work with somebody. And, fortunately for me, it worked out. But coaching, you sort of get out what you put in. So I think any coach that is really, good at what they do, if you buy into the program, if you do the steps, it'll be effective. So, I mean, I'm a pretty big proponent of the coaching discipline.
Did you do like a group program, or did you hire someone to like one-to-one mentor you?
Yeah, it was 1-to-1. So the program I did was, I think we had 3 calls a month that were 50 minutes. And there would be, like most things, we'd meet and it was intensive and I would be yawning and tired afterwards, but then there would be all this work to do. So go off and pretty clearly she helped me realize, like, it isn't just this writing. You're passionate about, mentoring and bringing up people. So coaching must be, a service offering for you. In addition, the challenge with writing is that every dollar or so I make, I have to write a word. So that's active revenue generation. So if this is truly going to be a business, I need at least more passive income. I mean, not entirely, but I mean, something to decouple minutes from dollars, because the goal of this is flexibility. So if I'm just trading time for money in a different form, that isn't giving me this currency that I was looking for, which is more time and freedom.
So are you, so on top of writing, you have like a coaching program, a coaching component of your business where you're helping other writers. Are you doing anything else that's like more passive?
I mean, for income, not really. I mean, other than the strategy piece, I mean, I think that has really been, I'll call it a game changer, not just for me, but for clients that I call them partners. Clients seem so transactional, and I really just push against that so hard. I mean, I feel like, the closer you work with somebody, the better the outcome is going to be for both sides. So my client partners, to call them that, have started looking to me for, all right, well, you work with us, but you also work with people in our industry. You probably know things that we don't see being on the work so much. We need somebody to kind of have a more open market view. So I've been able to share that. And so then the strategy packages are just kind of a set price with deliverables and things, competitive analysis, website, keyword research, whatever the deliverables may be. But that market insight has been really something that isn't tied to minutes. That's just a research that I do. I research quickly so I can turn these packages around faster than many others due to the background I have. So that would be the other one, but that's probably the least coupled way of, of minutes and dollars that I have.
Yeah, that's really key, is providing something of a really high value that isn't super labor intensive. I think that's really the hack, and with a service-based business like freelance writing. And I think the niche really, in my opinion, becomes that superpower, because if you specialize, it's just not going to take you as long to write. And you're charging I mean, I charge a flat fee. I don't know if you do, but if you charge a flat fee and you write something in an hour, you still collect your full fee.
Yeah, and so I think the general tendency of most people that engaged me, especially that were, formerly journalists and have kind of leaned into content marketing, was to charge by the hour. What is your hourly rate? My answer to that question, at this point, I get to say things like this, but I said, you don't want to know that because that's why you want me. Like you want me to, when you hire me versus someone else without the experience, we're going to look at the same thing in two very different ways and take very different things out of it. So what you're paying for are the results, not the time. And so that mindset shift has been really, it's taken me a while with a lot of client partners, but they realize it. Oh, you wrote this in this amount of time. It's like, well, yeah. So then you start to think, well, there's a minimum amount that I would need to have this make sense, due to all the other competing priorities that we have. When an opportunity comes along, you have to just ask yourself, what's the minimum amount that I would do this for? Like, just cut the, really, really be honest with yourself. And then what would I think is reasonable? And I don't think there's a need for what's the most I could get, because if you start that, then you'll do one project and they'll never come back. So the goal is to have them be happy with the experience and the output and want to work with you more. Freelancers' goals are always going to be recurring income, not just one-time buckets of money dumped at you. So yeah, I mean, I think that's that shift between hourly and kind of project based.
All right, we'll end it on this question. What advice would you give to beginner Adam who is just taking this leap and wasn't sure what was going to happen next and just had an inkling, like maybe this is something I could do, but you didn't know anything else? What would you tell yourself knowing what you know now?
I think you have to really understand your personal mission and your professional, I'll say professional mission. What is it through your work, time not spent with family, time not spent building your personal life, that you want to do? How do you best want to spend that time, and who most do you want to help? And then that's your North Star. And then you just layer in, what are these pieces that I've heard throughout my life that people think I do well? Maybe it's something you didn't expect, but you have to be open enough to receive them when you get that piece of feedback. You may be forcing yourself down a path that just isn't the right path. And so being open to considering other options, always tied to that personal mission, is going to make things so much more fulfilling. And if you're more fulfilled, the outputs are better, happiness goes up, just everything goes in a positive direction. So yeah, lean into your strengths, but then also just insist and don't ever compromise on that personal mission.
I love that. I think we can look to our childhood and life experience and gather those clues about what we should be doing, because it's what we enjoyed doing that didn't feel like work, and like whatever you pretended to be as a kid, or what, it's weird. Like even back in the day, I remember friends used to ask me to write their text messages when they needed to like have a confrontation with somebody, but they're like, I don't know what to say. I know what I want to say, but I don't know what to say. And I would like take their phone and write out these paragraphs. So it's like you look at these really like arbitrary moments, but then they all connect when you look back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. For me, I was in the, my friends and I were in the woods one day, and I saw this old car that was just rusting away. And I started to think about, how much waste would go into the environment, and, landfills and garbage things. And then I looked at cars driving and learned, oh, okay, you're telling me only 28 or 30% of the input fuel energy is used to move the car forward. The rest is waste. That's just not acceptable to me. And so that, even at a young age, probably, 8 to 12 years old, you start to develop like things that are passionate to you, and that just kind of frame where you go from there. And so those are things that if you chase them and get to pursue them professionally and someone pays you to do them, there's not much more fulfilling than that, I think, with work.
Yeah. And the what crazy thing is that there's no other little kid that looked at that car and had that same thought. Like it's entirely unique to the way your brain works. And like you said, I think that's the key to fulfillment. So
Well, until that shows up in an article and someone reads it and goes, huh, I never thought of it that way. That's progressive change. So
right.
yeah, it's exciting.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. This has been super informative, and I'm excited to release this episode because there's so many people who are going to be in a similar situation who want to make that transition. Where's the best place for aspiring writers to find you and your mentorship, and how they can get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, trying to be more and more every day. Adam.s-s-kimmel. And then my website is askconsultingsolutions.com. So those are the two
Wonderful.
best places.
All right, I'll link to that below. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. This is great.